Hi, it's Hayley Morrison, your host for Let's Talk Out Loud, the Health Kick series.
I'm getting down with a good life. Getting down with a good life.
So I'm dressed in the same clothes because I did 2 sessions back to back, not because I wear these every day, although I am getting a little bit fond of this top. So I also spoke to a lovely lady called Kathleen, who is a psychologist, and she has created a journal, which is a self-help grief guide for teens. And in a session, obviously, we talked about teenagers and that actually being a teenager is quite hard in itself. You know, you're transitioning from being a young child, going into adulthood, and there's kind of lots going on, physically as well as emotionally. You know, your body's changing. And we just kind of discussed like grief kind of being added on top of that, the different types of grief. Grief isn't necessarily just losing somebody, it could actually be just, you know, losing yourself because you're changing. And also just some tips and tools that you can use obviously when you're in that first stages of grief. There is a lot of information out there. Kathleen's been so kind to share some links, so I'll put that in the description as well. But I like the idea of a journal because she said you can turn it at any page, the back you can even start in. So it just means as a teenager they can kind of like at their own peril just go and get it and kind of look at it. So and it also works as a preventative as well. So we spoke about like this isn't taught in schools. We don't get taught, you know, that at one point in our life we will suffer grief, and how to deal with that and what to expect. There's just no expectations at all. And I think because of that, it can hit us really hard. So I think having something that is a preventative is amazing because people can kind of learn a little bit about it first and it kind of prepares them somewhat, um, for ever having to go through grief. Obviously everybody grieves differently, so it's not a case of, you know, you're going to know what to do. I just think it's something that I'm really passionate about people knowing and people learning. And Kathleen's amazing. She also does one-on-one sessions, workshops, and she doesn't just speak to people about grief. She speaks to people about many issues in different settings. So whether you're in a couple or a family and you need some sort of therapy, then Kathleen might be the person for you. So all of her links will be in the description. So if you just want to chat to her, or if you obviously want to order the journal, then you can do so via the links in the description. But I hope you take something from this. And again, if you do want to reach out to Kathleen, our links will be there. So, hi everyone. In this episode, I'm really excited to speak to Kathleen. It's an issue that I think is really important that not a lot of people are prepared for, not a lot of people talk about. But she has created a journal, a self-help guide to grief for teens. But instead of me obviously introducing it, I'm just going to head straight over to Kathleen and just ask, like, what is it that you have created?
Okay, so thank you, Hayley. It's lovely to be here with you today. So I'm a psychotherapist. I work predominantly initially with young people because that was my focus. And I was giving them blank journals in sessions, and they were like, "What do I do with this?" So I thought, okay, I'll have to create something. So using my art skills, being an art teacher for 20 years
Oh, wow.
prior, I then put my clinical skills together and create this guide because it's all around self-help, and we talk about the 3 C's in counselling, um, and the 3 C's are really early intervention. So we're looking at choose, connect, and communicate, and that's what you're doing to help yourself. And I think early intervention really is important for young people, especially this generation and future generations to come. So the guide is it's helped to promote and enable a unique understanding of the fluid stages of grief, and I'm all about normalizing. And what I do is, I think this really helps you sort of channel your feelings and emotions, learning about articulating that as well,
Mhm.
because there's 4 stages in this, and
Mhm.
it's just breaking it down for you to work through at your pace. So it's an investment of time. This guide will transform into a privatised lived memoir of your grief journey. and the pages will explore the theories, the moods, the thoughts, the feelings, and emotions surrounding your grief. So it's there's nothing like it. I bought
Yeah.
it out. I made it, sat in my back garden under a bit of the Indian bean tree that I used to have,
Uh-huh.
and I spent hours creating these images and putting the words together, and I created a poem as well. So
Oh,
that's,
wow. Yeah.
yeah, so it's 100 pages. So you can draw, you can scribble, you can add photos, you can do what you like because it's yours to
Yeah.
own. It's captured the essence of what that grief was for you. It's almost like a time capsule.
Yeah.
It took 6 to 8 months, and then I found a publisher to help me put it all together.
Yeah. Wow.
So 4 years.
Yeah. So, and is that what you use obviously in your practice, like now when you speak to people? And what kind of does it? Because I know you said it covers the steps of grief. I've only went through my first proper grief last year, and before that, I never you don't think about it, do you? You don't think anything of it. But it was funny, I was talking to somebody who was going through grief, and I'd said to them, I'm sorry, I haven't been through grief. I'm not really the right person to speak to. So I started researching, which probably came at a good time because it prepared me a little bit. But there's the 5 stages of grief. Is that what your book also includes, or do you have like a different model? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I have Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages, and
Mhm,
that's right at the beginning. And I always introduce anyone that comes to me for bereavement or a grief issue or theme. Is I normally say, look at this because it's basic. So it's the shock, denial, bargaining, and looking at the sort of aspects of anger, depression, and working towards acceptance. And there's many more though. And actually, I think, that was sort of gathered in the sort of mid 1960s.
yeah.
So moving on from that, and that was somebody that worked within a residential care facility. We now know that there's many other aspects to loss, but I use the Strobe Schultz method as well, because young people grieve differently to adults. And
Mm,
what they do is they oscillate. So they might jump from one thing, oh, there's an amazing thing going on, I want to go and do it. And then they'll feel really low, and remind themselves or be reminded by one of their sort of senses that they've lost this thing, this person,
mhm,
place, or it could be a pet or it could be their own identity. So, you know, it's really important to go, well, we have to understand that they grieve differently, their brains are wired differently. But also, this journal for me is about learning about another model as well, which is Lewis Tompkin and or Lois Tompkin. They talk about growing round the grief. So you grow with it. It never leaves you. It's
mhm.
part of who you are. And I think it is about understanding that we do evolve, but we evolve with the loss.
Yeah.
Because once you've experienced grief, like you've said, and I'm sorry for your loss,
Thank you.
um, it is really important to go, well, that's changed me,
Mhm,
but how does it change me? So that's where the 3 C's come into:
mhm,
early intervention, maybe looking at this guide, because not everyone wants counselling. I understand that.
mhm.
So I thought, if I create this, it's up to them to process it, learn and educate themselves, but also have somewhere to channel it. And
Yeah.
then work towards, at the back of the guide is a list of charitable sectors that they can then refer to, either
Mhm.
self-refer to if they're under 18, obviously with their parents' permission, but if they're over 18, they can self-refer. There's apps as well. So I bought the second edition out in February last year because
Mhm.
some of the services like Kooth has changed their name. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's just been very relevant and up to date
Yeah.
again.
So would you say that your journal is something that teens could even potentially buy when they haven't yet went through grief, but thinking, oh, this would be good because you're obviously talking about prevention. And sometimes, like in my case, you don't think about it at all. You think, oh, it's never going to happen to me, or it's miles off. So do you think it's good that people kind of think about maybe it's investing in something like that as a life skill to prepare for, yeah, there being a lot
That's
of
a really,
prevention.
that's a really good point, Hayley, because we look at grief and we go, okay, it could be anticipatory grief. It could be the acute stages of grief. So anticipatory grief is you're preparing yourself emotionally, mentally, physically, or maybe spiritually for a loss that's due to come. It
Yeah.
could be a family member, a pet. We prepare ourselves. And that's the price we pay for love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How quickly we grieve and how long we grieve is the price that we pay for love. And I think it is about respecting that time and that event, but honoring it in a different way. And when we have, I don't mention it in the journal, but we have continuing bonds, but the pages guide you towards that. It's about respecting and honoring the person that once was in your life, or
Mm.
the thing or place or part of your identity at all. I mean, we grieve for many things, but I
Mm-hmm.
think early intervention for me, they say normally sort of 3 to 6 months. I think that's a good time scale, but actually, if you need something sooner, you're the best judge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because everyone's obviously different as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So do you know, like with the grief as well, what do you think has come up as like the hardest part of grief? Is it like, for example, somebody who maybe is got an attachment to something that they're seeing every day, it's that realization of the whole like daily routines changed. It's like it's not there anymore. Or for me, it was more the comprehension of like comprehending that that person like isn't on this planet. So is there like a certain thing that you find in grief people struggle with the most, or is it just different?
It's unique, and I think some people really struggle with that acute stage, the denial, the bargaining. Could
Hmm.
I have done more? Maybe the shock of it. But
Yeah.
people can get stuck in that process too.
Hmm.
So when they come to me, they're either really stuck, or they're trying to work out what's going on. And they could be midway through, they could be through the other end of it. But I think processing it and communicating it with somebody that's trained and understands is paramount, I
Hmm.
think, to just resolving this for yourself, because we all have a lot of questions, and what the question that comes with grief is, what if?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like hindsight thing, isn't it, as well? Like
Mm.
that's a hard thing. And I mean, even though I think I went through a little bit of that as well, like what if they, and then I've had to stop myself and I just binge kind of was reading like different things on like how to cope and I think for me, I think my logic kicked in a lot. But then I think sometimes am I being too logic and am I holding some emotions and not letting them kind of be felt and pass through? Like, did your book talk about that as well, like trapped trauma and trapped emotions from
Well,
grief?
yeah, grief is a traumatic event, and
Yeah.
that's actually accepting that and understanding that actually all the things that, because there is one there as a trauma model in there. It's Dr. Janina Fisher. So everyone that I've referenced, I've acknowledged at the back. And
Yeah.
I think it's about trying to understand that our brains are wired and our bodies are wired to manage this and try and survive it.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of education in this journal, because
Mhm.
I think, what would I wanted to have known as a child growing
Yeah.
up? The
Yeah.
first loss that I ever had was my grandfather, who I was so close to. And
Mhm.
I was told that, we don't talk about it. It's very taboo. And once
Yeah.
they go, I didn't even get to go to his service. So, and the same with my grandmother. It's interesting. So
Mm.
those two significant figures for me were the first introduction to loss. And I think that in itself was just so, I suppose, debilitating in its own right. But they're normally here.
Yeah.
We never talk about loss, and maybe culturally, I come from an Irish heritage.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of taboos there.
Mhm.
You know.
And do you think the reason why people don't talk about it is because they don't want to feel vulnerable, or they're scared of what that might mean if they like let themselves slip into that emotion? Is it because it's a big new feeling? Like, what would you say is the main reason people don't openly just talk about it with their family? And
Well, I think, people become very overwhelmed really quickly. And again, when clients come to me and they say to me, I can't talk to my family, that's disenfranchised grief. You're all grieving, but you've all got a different experience or
yeah,
perspective. So it's not a safe space to take that conversation and be really explicit. So that's why therapy is really good. Or the
yeah,
journal. Work through this. And if you still have questions and lots of what ifs, then once you've used the journal, you can take that to therapy. And if it's hard to articulate, because young people really struggle, use the pages and your responses to, I suppose, articulate that for you. This
hmm,
is how I plan, and
yeah,
this is why I felt that.
yeah,
Because you're learning to articulate this experience as well through the grief guide. And a lot of hospices are using it as a grief model. There's
hmm,
schools, clinicians, there's fostering agencies, there's is a charity down south, Bereaved by Suicide.
hmm,
You know, so I think it's gone to wherever it's meant to go, and as long as it reaches the audience that need it most,
yeah.
my job's done.
Yeah, I think it's amazing because self-help now, I think a lot of more people are kind of looking at that, aren't they? Because they're struggling to maybe get an appointment on the NHS, or they can't afford to pay to go private. So the first step now for a lot of people will be able to now have options to access things that they can do themselves. And then obviously with your book, going through it, at least it's like that first step, isn't it? To kind of the understanding, and then it might kind of help them to kind of then get external help as well if that hasn't, I guess, worked. Do
Well,
you
that's
find, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I think, as you say, if somebody said to me, there's this resource out there, I'd probably be the first one
Mm,
to buy, because not, if I knew nothing about grief, it's all
mhm.
about education and
Yeah,
knowledge power. And even though I've created it, it's part of a trilogy. I've got one for younger people that I'm prepared to
right.
sort of at the stage of getting that sort of published. But the third one will be for adults, because I think a lot of adults are accessing this one as well, because they
Mhm.
like funny enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's their inner child. Um,
Yes.
I just think it's really important to get the need and support the support that you need in that moment or that time frame.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's just knowing where to go to get that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously the first one you've done, you've chose teens. Like, what was your reason that you wanted to focus on teens first?
Um, I did well, I was an art teacher for sort of 20 years, but during my sort of training from 2010, I did some respite volunteer foster caring for the local authority.
Mhm,
And I just found this opened up a whole new world for me. And I thought, this is the driver for me becoming the therapist that I am today.
mm,
It's just to help them communicate, acknowledge, and be heard, I guess, in a sense for themselves, because it's such a very difficult age to navigate,
mhm.
you know. And there's
Yeah.
the landscape of your mind and your body, but also the landscape of the communities that you're in too.
Mhm.
Um, do I fit in? It's a really difficult age.
It is,
Um,
isn't it? There's so many things happening, so many milestones. Yeah, and I think a lot of parents that I've witnessed, the attitude towards teenagers is a lot more abrupt. It's like, oh, you think you know what you're talking about and you don't have a clue, and instead of actually acknowledging that whatever they're feeling at this moment is real for them in this moment. Um,
mm,
and I think as you get into an adult, you forget what it was like as well. And obviously times change. So I think there's a lot of that. Like teenagers probably do feel like they are alone when nobody understands them because nobody's showing that they do.
That's it.
So,
That's it.
mhm,
Yes, I worked with a lot of young children, well, from babies upwards, really, but a lot of the young sort of teens. And because I taught the sort of from secondary age children and into alternative provisions, there's a real surge or volcano of emotions that erupts during that period as well. And I think it's really helping them to navigate that. And they can do that in this journal. It's not just for grief, it's about trying to understand what feelings and emotions are about. Why do we have them? They're there to help us survive. And we're so busy ignoring and avoiding them. We're not taught that.
Yeah, and I think as well, you briefly mentioned it near the beginning, like grief, there's different types of grief. And I think I grieve a lot of like me younger self. Like sometimes I sit and I reminisce, and I do think that's probably a form of grief. Like, would you agree that in becoming a teenager, you're losing that younger self, aren't you? So is that something you think teenagers probably struggle with as well, like losing themselves that you mentioned briefly earlier?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I work a lot with veterans as well, and there is a lot of navigating your world, and obviously coming back from an institutionalized way of being and living to then navigating civilian life. And I think we have that throughout our lives, and trying to navigate childhood into adulthood. Once you're 18, you have to have it all sorted out. You've got to have a focus. You've got to have a future planned out. Too much pressure.
Yeah.
You don't
What do you
know.
want to be? What college do you want to go to? What job you want to do? Who do you want to marry? How many kids do you want? Yeah. It's a lot of
And then
stuff.
I do get young clients that want to straddle that childhood aspect of them too, and hold on to that. Okay, I'm not going to let go.
Yeah.
So there is a real delay sometimes in, I suppose, into adulthood, that sort of, transgression into from child to adulthood, and then with a load of responsibilities. A lot of children want to grow up a lot quicker now, but they don't realise what's ahead of them when they get there. So then they want to go backwards. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really fascinating subject actually, that
Mm.
I just think it does need navigating sensitively, but in the right space and right platform,
Mhm.
you know, and with the right community around you too.
Yeah. So whereabouts are you based? Do you do a lot of work like face to face, or do you do online stuff as well?
Yeah, I do predominantly. I do online, but I do face-to-face sessions. So I have a place in Newcastle. I've got an office in Durham here,
Mhm.
and I'm due to have one in Seaham. So I do face-to-face sessions with young people from the age of 6 up,
Mhm.
um, right the way through.
Yeah.
So, and I also work with, as I say, young people, but individuals and couples in
Mhm.
therapy.
And is this just grief, or is this other therapies as well?
It's anything really at all,
Mhm.
anything at all. People uh, find me. A lot of it's by word of mouth,
Yeah.
really.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of the time, I'm thinking, well, I would just want to. I don't want people to be in therapy forever. That's
Yeah.
my model of therapy, because
Mhm.
I think it's about dipping in where you need to and
Mhm.
dipping back out, but also
Yeah.
building that independence in the client rather than the codependence on
Yes.
me.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that sounds good. So if obviously somebody was watching and they were thinking, could I need help? Do I need help? What kind of things like um would you say people come to you for? Like obviously anxiety or trauma? Like what are the bunch of things?
It could be, yeah, so it could be a traumatic event that's happened in their life. It could be stress, it could be work-related stress, it could be family relationships, um, it could be bereavement,
Mhm.
but people don't realize they're grieving until they arrive. It's interesting.
Yeah. That's
So
sad.
it's sort of normalizing that for them. So yeah, it could be just navigating yourself. Identity is a big one for me.
Mm.
So, I've worked with a lot of LGBTQ plus
Mhm.
clients as well, young people that are
Yeah.
trying to navigate their world internally,
Mhm.
as well as externally. So, you know, that's why I've created the guide, because I just think sometimes, you need something before you need therapy.
Yeah.
Um, to help you process stuff.
It's like
And then
pre-therapy.
yeah,
Oh,
so you're coming a little bit equipped, not sort of
mm,
blind to the idea of not knowing why you're in therapy.
yeah.
So it gives you, I suppose, the tools and some strategies to cope in the here and now.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
but
No, that sounds great. And so, say for example, you've got a teenager who's obviously interested in buying the journal or looking at therapy. Is there any kind of on the spot tips you could give for somebody who suddenly just found themselves in the midst of like a grieving episode without having like access to the book or anything else at that moment to help them kind of regulate their emotions? Is there any like tips that you even share in the book that you could share on here now so people get a taster of what's in? Does that make sense?
yeah, so if it's early intervention and you're saying, actually, I've just suffered a really big loss, it's to stay with that process. But if you feel you need to talk to people, if you're under 18, obviously speak to family, speak to your GP, first point of call on every occasion. And they may sort of navigate you through a referral process through the community. But if you're just curious and you think, well, let me go online to see what's out there, there's a lot out there. Grief Encounter London have lots of resources.
Hmm.
Um, there's other services. So if you go on the hubofhope.com, the
Hmm.
Hub of Hope is a charitable national network of charities that you can reach out to for support and guidance around loss or
Hmm.
guidance around what it is that you're trying to understand. And I
Hmm.
think, again, it's just getting the right platform, the right intervention. But if it's loss and it's your first experience, the guide is there to help you navigate that.
Hmm.
So it's available on my website, it's available on Waterstones and on Amazon. But it's $14.99, but it's, I guess, you know, I've tried to keep the cost down because I want it to be accessible
Yeah.
for everyone. But also there's a lot of charities I'm managing to deliver some bereavement work, so workshops through St Cuthbert's here in Durham.
Hmm.
So, and that's to their young people. So it's a 2-hour workshop. It's to let's bring this conversation to somewhere that's safe and comfortable, and let's just navigate it on a very brief, I suppose, summary of
Hmm.
your loss. It's to work with about 6 to 8 young people and then give them the journal to
Hmm.
take away, to start the process.
Yeah.
So it's
Hmm.
kick-starting it. And then I think St Oswald's are thinking about me training their staff because I've
Hmm.
done some training as well to other charities like Teens in Crisis in Gloucestershire.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to just give people the tools or the right information that they need at the right time. So
Yeah.
I have to take inquiries through my website and by email info at inixshire@publishing.com. And
Yeah.
that, if you're unsure, just speak to the people around you, but have a look on that hubofhope.com and see
Yeah.
what's out there and what you need. Yeah.
Hmm. That sounds great. And I'll post all of your links in the video as well, like your website link and everything else there, link to your journal and stuff. So do you know how you mentioned St. Cuthbert's there? Is that the church? Is it the school called St. Cuthbert's or the church? Not the church,
No, it's a hospice.
the hospice. All right, the hospice, right? Okay. Just because we've got a St. Cuthbert's school, and when you said that, I was like, do they do this in schools? I don't think they do they? They don't provide anything like this
No.
in schools. And I know there's some people that I know have went around schools and done like mental health talks but I've just wondered, did they cover grief? Is that something that's covered? And maybe it should be taught in schools as part of a life lesson
You're right,
for
Hayley.
them
You're
to
right.
prepare. Hmm.
Yeah, because St Oswald's have said to me, our staff could do with some training on this, even though it's a hospice.
Hmm.
Um, and I said, well, maybe they know a lot. I don't want to recap on something they don't know. But it's always good to recap
Yeah.
because there's changes and
Hmm.
developments within the field. But I was going to start a social enterprise project just doing that.
Yeah, wow. Well, if you do, let me know and I'd love to help. I'd go into schools.
Definitely.
So I do a bit of work now, like going into secondary schools, doing like supply teaching. Um, yeah, so when I'm in there as well, obviously we have like quite a good relationship, like with the children that I'm in the class with, and we talk about like life stuff as well. So that's something that could be good if I had the knowledge, obviously, to be able to kind of pass it on. But what you want to do is get it to the, I guess, the boards of educators to say, get this into your curriculum and make it an
Well,
official
it
thing.
could be because I did a lot of supply work when I gave up my teaching job
Hmm.
to then study.
Yeah.
So I've been, and then they go, "Oh, this really works. I like your approach. You're
Hmm.
so good with kids."
Hmm.
Because I was an art teacher, it was an easier subject, I guess. But
Yeah.
I used to get called in to do PSHE, but I used to sort of put my own spin on it because even though you had a few sort of basic subjects to talk about, we could
Hmm.
expand on those because
Yeah.
I've got the knowledge and clinical expertise. But if you feel that that's of benefit, or if anyone feels that that's of benefit to their school or their teams, I'm happy to go in and do some work
Mhm.
on that. Um, and then the 2-hour workshops really is about just going in to navigate grief, early stages, midway through, or even at the end of. Because again, a lot of people come to me with unresolved grief. You
Mhm.
know, they've processed it for a good couple of years, and then it get classes delayed grief,
Mhm.
and then that's prolonged, which has health impacts physically, emotionally, and
Yeah.
mentally on them. So I think, early intervention.
Yeah, of course. And this prolonged, is that a lot of it is because they're not accepting of it. They just haven't got to that acceptance stage and they've just maybe distracted themselves or
Yeah, people are very good at distracting or
mm,
avoiding. And I
yeah.
think, it depends on, I suppose, the generation as well.
Mhm.
It depends on communities, what their ethos is around loss.
Mhm.
Like I said, going back to when I was a child, you know, the community that I grew up in, um, it was very taboo once the person had passed to even mention their name
Mhm.
because everyone was harboring it. And when I say harboring, we don't know what we're holding on to and what
Yeah.
we need to let go of.
Mhm. And that it's a strange world now because we've got that much information at our fingertips, haven't we? But a lot of the time, people are probably too distracted that they don't even know that it's there to access and they can find out whatever they wanted to now. Um, and connection's totally different, isn't it? It's not like when well, I'm saying in the olden days, obviously I'm only 40, but like back in the day, nobody would talk about it because they would, like you say, be tough. And like, for example, men had to be tough and strong and they weren't allowed to talk about their emotions. And all of that's kind of changing, isn't it? And it's kind of becoming more accepted. But whether or not people lean into that and open up is a different, I guess, different story.
Absolutely. And I think, again, communities, I've worked with a lot of different communities. I would like to say I'm culturally sensitive in that aspect too, but not to be stereotypical in any aspect of my sort of ideology of working with any particular group. But
Mhm.
I think sometimes we have to respect that may have worked for them or their ancestors or the
Mhm.
generations that came before, but life has changed
Yeah.
and we've changed, and it is about being more open and explicit.
Mhm.
But again, it depends on where you're taking your, I suppose, conversations or
Mhm.
inquiries. And sometimes within the communities that you're in, it might not be the best fit for
Mhm.
now. So it
Yeah.
is trying to find the best fit. And that applies also to the therapist. Not everyone's going to enjoy sitting um, with somebody that could be very person-centered around this.
Yeah.
They may be really they may struggle. Whereas I work to accommodate, and because of my art background, I'm very good at doodling. I've even had sessions with young people that are struggling to talk about stuff, and then I
Yeah.
sit doodling, and they go, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm sitting here just doodling. Do you want to join me?"
Yeah.
And one child said to me, "Can you draw me?" So I did
Ah,
a quick sketch, and
yeah.
then we had to work on their identity. How lovely is that?
That's really good, yeah. Oh, I like that.
There you are.
Can you
So
draw me, Kathleen? I'm only kidding.
I can, yeah.
Oh, I'll have to look at some of your artwork. And I mean, I've got a teenage a niece who, well, she's went through grief as well, because I lost my dad. It was her granddad, and then she lost her dad's dad, I think it was not long ago. So she's only 15. So I don't even know if she's processed that, how she's processing that. And although we are close, it's not something we've really spoke about much, to be honest. She knows
Mhm.
I'm always here, and she is quite open, but that's not been something that was spoke about. So maybe it's something I should bring up and say, how are you feeling? So, and maybe it's even like, see if this journal is something that like she could benefit from as well. So
Well, that's it. I mean, it's 12 to 25, but I think, you know, it's there for anyone that needs it. And I
yeah,
think it is about knowing what's available.
yeah,
And, you know, parents say to me, how do I introduce this to my child? And I said, just leave it in their room,
yeah,
leave, leave it on their bedside table.
mm,
And um, it might be helpful to talk to them first to see if that's what they'd like, but they
mhm,
don't really know what they need. So
yeah,
until they start opening it up and start pouring themselves into it, because it's got space for you to reflect and pause for thought. And
mhm,
it is about, actually, do I want to draw? Do I want to write? Um, do I want to just sit with the process?
mhm,
That's what that enables them to do. So it's more art in grief than it is um, anything else, really, I guess, because it's got images there. I've just thought of all the different learners that I've had over the years. I'm very visual. I'm
yeah,
very kinesthetic. I'm very much a doer. I like to draw, doodle. I've done that since I was a child. So, um, and it's also about knowledge and reading, so they can pace themselves in that guide.
mhm,
And there is no right or wrong. You can start at the back, you can go from the front, you
yeah,
can middle, just wherever you feel drawn to.
mhm. No, that sounds great. So is there anything else that you think would be good to mention or cover? Obviously before we end the session, it's 11 o'clock. I don't know. Is there anything that springs to your mind that would be good to say to end?
Um, I suppose just if you are feeling that you've entered into an episode of grief, um, and it might feel prolonged or it could be the early stages, it's just best to just reach out and get the right support. And
Mhm.
that could be your GP at the first instance, it could be parents, it could be anyone at all around you that is a network of support. But also thinking outside the box, look at that hubofhope.com.
Mhm.
Um, look at what's available. There's so much available. And I know, as you've mentioned there, Hayley, about trying to navigate what you need. Sometimes it is about just making some notes and then going back to it, because
Yeah.
it can be overwhelming when you go online.
Mm.
But I hope the conversation we've had today helps some people identify that they could be, or that they might be, and or that's due to come. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just important to support the communities, and
Mhm.
that's what I've done. I can't work with everyone, but I thought
Yeah.
this could help people kickstart their process.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome.